Hi guys, welcome to this edition of ArmCare IQ. In this week's edition, we're going to go and build off of part one. We're going to talk about the training concepts behind ArmCare and what matters most to improving health, velocity, and command. And hopefully this takes us out of this state of emergency, because what we're doing currently is not effective in preventing injury. If you guys like what you're listening to, please like us on YouTube, subscribe. We have a link to our newsletter, which is great. We go into deeper detail on our ArmCare IQs. We have links to podcasts, our blogs, and also incentives for making purchases with our company. That link is in the description. And here we go. So I'm not going to get into a ton of training concepts, but the one concept that I really want to, communicate to people, I call it the SPEAR concept of training. Okay, and this is just an acronym to think about. What does your ArmCare training have to consist of? Well, one, has to have strength. Has to have a lot of varieties of strength. So we talk about strength, and I'm talking about maximum strength. Then I talk about power. But our device is looking at push rate. We're eventually going to be looking at rate of torque development, how quickly an isometric force is applied. So we need some element of power, or the speed element of creating force, right? Then we have to have endurance. Endurance is important, and unfortunately in the SPEAR model, endurance is coming first for a lot of our ArmCare programs. We're not thinking of strength. We're not thinking of the power related aspects. We're thinking about high volume and usually low load. So that's the endurance component. Then we need to think about asymmetry, not only between left to right imbalances, but we need to think within the arm from internal rotation, external rotation relationships. So we need to think about that kind of training as well in the concept. So I want to talk about just some of the strength features that we need to consider in the program. Okay, so isometrics, that's the first thing. That's when the joint is at a fixed position. There's no motion at the joint, but there's a maximal contraction. They're holding a position, and you're squeezing as hard as possible. You're creating maximum co-contraction of the joint. So you're basically, all the muscles are compressing around at the same time. And that helps you create early rate of force development. So how quickly you can develop force at the beginning. And I've created some models, but let's just think of this mental model that if I'm pulling a car, let's say my arm is the car, and the rope is my tendons and my muscle unit, my muscle tendon junction that has to be tight to pull. The isometrics and these co-contractions, they train the athlete to be able to be very reactive and pulling that rope tight before they can move the car. So as my arm's laying back, right, my internal rotator cuff is being eccentrically conditioned, but there comes to be a point where that thing has to pull the arm forward. It's got to change from eccentric to concentric and pull the arm forward. Isometrics actually help with that component of training. Okay, so they got to be in the program. Then you have eccentrics, right? And eccentrics, people are really worried about them in ArmCare programs. Do they increase tensile stress? Do they cause soreness? There's a big concern with that particular exercise type, but we need to give it the stress that it's going to receive in the game. And it's really hard to do. Obviously eccentrics are much slower than throwing, but we need to be able to create strength under length, which most of the injuries to the throwing arm are deceleration based. So we need to train that. And also eccentrics increase fascicle length. There's a part of your muscle that's like the casing of fibers. And when we can increase length in those, we increase contractile velocity. So eccentrics, they also can make you throw faster, which to me is a no-brainer. And a lot of athletes, they do eccentrics during rehabilitation, and then once in the season, they stop and they kind of lose that strength quality. So we need to have that as part of our S, right? Then we get into a P factor, which is the ballistics, right? At a SPEAR, our P is ballistics. So we want to improve the power, the push rate. When we're evaluating our strength measures with the dynamometer, and these ballistics, they give you just rapid movement. This is what's increasing your rate of torque development. Really important for power. And so they need to be in the program. And then perturbation. We need to have some type of vibrational exercise. Some people use a body blade, some people use a shoulder sphere. There's lots of products. We like to use our weighted balls, our plyo balls, because the plyo ball, it slows the perturbation down, so you get more co-contraction. You're taking out slack with a little bit higher degree of activation. And the other thing, it's great for proprioception. All these muscles are moving in a vibrational sense, and your joints kind of knowing where it is in space and how the muscles are trying to center it, especially if we're moving it through ranges. We're doing stuff like that. And it's also good for circulation. These alternating contraction relaxations, they're really causing some muscle pumping, that's rhythmic. And we're starting to get some blood flow to circulate there. And when we're increasing, lactic acid, it can happen. And, especially if you do this over time, you get a little bit of burning. The lactic acid is actually, it really gets the growth hormones, increased, and they want to go to that area, and repair. So having these elements in the ArmCare training, I think is really important. And a lot of the programs are missing this stuff. Irradiation, open-handed exercise. There are bands that are sold where your hands open in space, or you're doing what we call black burns or six-pack exercises where you're not gripping anything and you're just holding them against your own body's resistance, or even cuff weights, not gripping anything. You're leaving activation of the cuff on the table. You're leaving activation of the forearm flexors, the muscles that stabilize the elbow, on the table. So, I want to show a few examples of how can we do, these SPE qualities of spear using the band, using the bands, especially the crossover symmetry bands, which, we sell. And I think they're superior to any band that's on the market, to be honest, because of this irradiation factor. In the picture I'm showing on the left is just electrodes. There's been a number of studies look at open hand versus closed hand grip strength, or grip on shoulder strength, and activation. And there's some pretty convincing evidence. So here's an isometric pattern, and this is all basically the same pattern. It doesn't matter what exercise you're doing, but this particular pattern, we call this the ATYT, and you're alternating these positions. But you can see, when the athlete gets into these contracted states, they're holding it at these positions, and you can change the time frame of how you hold them. They all have a different component of endurance, but the key is to really contract maximally in these positions. Squeeze as hard as you can, and don't compensate. Don't try to use your body's motion to keep your muscles turned on. You want to be able to focus on isometrics in your program. And here's a version of eccentrics. So same exercises, but now we're essentially just bringing the bands back to a return position with a tempo. If, let's just say you're using a heavy band and you want to do single arm, you could use your other hand. You could use a pretty heavy band and you could pull it back with two arms. If I'm in this Y position, and I could then get to my eccentric under very high load, and I could get my hands and help them back, where you can increase the intensity of your eccentrics. That's possible. And especially with, more of an upper level athlete that may not get enough stimulation from a lighter band, that's definitely an option. Now we want to get to ballistics. So when we talk about the ballistics, we're talking about very explosive movement and moving through a full range of motion. So you can see he gets going here. Same thing. This is the ATYT, but you can see how quickly he's moving through these positions, trying to keep a pretty stable posture of the center mass of the body and the core. But you can see he's moving through these things really quickly. And, that increases power. Now, here's the thing. If you load these up too heavy for ballistics, you're not going to move them very fast. So power is going to go down, right? Power is force times velocity. If I start increasing the force, my velocity is going down. I'm not really improving power. So the key is creating a bit of a load. You want a resistance to work against, and you want to be able to move it quickly through different ranges. So the ballistics, and I like the band because you're irradiating and you got this ballistic activity. So it's kind of a double whammy there. Now we have perturbation, same exercise, and it all depends on how much you want to do your perturbation. These are these vibrations, short range, quick contractions, just increasing the reactivity of the co-contraction. It's good for circulation. It's good for a warm-up pattern as well. Doing perturbations, you're starting to get some blood in there. And, the whole thing is, if it is a warm-up, you don't want to encourage fatigue. So, a couple perturbations is fine, 3 or 4. When you're trying to do a circulation process post-pitching in your programming, you may want to do an extended perturbation. It might be for, 30 seconds, possibly. You have the choice. But you do want to encourage a little bit of lactic acid, and you want to increase blood flow in there, for sure. So, I want to tie some things together as we close out this ArmCare IQ. We need a real concentrated approach on talking about strength. Coaches need to understand strength. Strength coaches, obviously, they probably have a good understanding. Clinicians, even front office members, directors of player development, like, people have to be focused on strength. And we've talked about the two components of this psychophysiologic determinant of fatigue-induced injury, and this mechanical determinant of fatigue-induced injury, and strength is the bridge. So we have to be able to communicate those things. And that, this particular study that Kyle Matzel did, is he found that coaches, there was only 6% of all the coaches that he had in the survey, so 38 out of 654 coaches, actually thought strength was a major contributor to injury. That is amazing to me, that we don't consider strength, a weak arm, to be an injury risk. And usually we're thinking in the industry that a tight arm, a restricted range of motion arm, is more exposed to injury, and it's not. There is some evidence, but there's a lot more evidence on strength weakness and what it means to injury in a throwing athlete. And I kind of want to leave everybody with this slide here, and this sums it up, for everything. This is one of the reasons why I think ArmCare training is not working. And the reason is we're taking a one size fits all, a general program, and spoon feeding it to a lot of athletes. Right. And my impression is that one size fits none. In the adolescent world, the amateur world, these general programs, they probably protect athletes to a level of 50%. It's kind of a 50-50 shoot, that you're increasing strength. There may be some prevention, but if we can individualize, I estimate that an athlete would have 80% protection of injury. Now, there's probably 20% of random things that can happen. But I would think on the strength side of things, I would give that a measure of about 80%, because you would be training customized to your data if you utilize our product, and you would get exactly what you need. And my worry is, with the general program, could we be training into muscular imbalance? And if you're using a general program for your athletes, I want you to think about this as the last thought, that maybe my programs are creating imbalances and I don't know because I'm not assessing them. Thanks for listening to this week's ArmCare IQ session, and have a great rest of the week.